Why not? That's the very question I would ask myself when I was in my mid-40s and I would see these shows on National Geographic where climbers were going up to the summit of Everest, and I would ask myself, why might I not try that? The problem was, again, I was in my mid-40s. All I was doing at the time was playing golf. I will tell you, I did climb out of some deep sand traps occasionally, but that was not particularly good training for mountaineering. So what I'd like to do is tell you about my adventure of, in essence, going from more or less a couch potato to successfully climbing the tallest mountains on each of the continents, the so-called 7 summits. Now, let me just say right from the beginning, I had no intention of climbing all of these mountains. In fact, I just wanted to give one a shot. And as I learned some of the obstacles and characteristics of the mountains, I was even more convinced there was some that I would never try because it just wasn't possible for me. Well, the first mountain I decided to give a shot for was Mount Rainier. I was told that this gives you a real taste of alpine climbing. So I went to a climbing store with the equipment list designed for Mount Rainier, got the biggest and the best things, and it was off to Mount Rainier. Now, when I try to describe to you how my success was, it was a total disaster. I took the disappointment cleaver route, that's the most common route that one does, and I made it to this point called the top of the disappointment cleaver. And I'll never forget the person that was leading our team. He said to me, "I think you're finished." And there was absolutely no question that that was the case. So what was the problem? Well, there was a couple of problems. Number one, my equipment was way too heavy. The pack I had was the biggest one. It weighed 8 pounds empty. The one I currently use is 4 pounds, and it's exactly the same size. But even more important than that, the climber was too heavy. I mean, I was totally out of shape. I was not doing what was required for mountaineering. So what did I do? Well, I started to do stairs. I would go to our north campus, a 12-story building, and do 12 flights up, take the elevator down, and just repeat that for an hour or so, and I did that several times per week prior to climbs. That's really how I trained. Well, a friend of mine told me, he says, well, you ought to go and try Kilimanjaro. They say it's not too bad. It's a non-alpine climb. There's no snow or glacier climbing, but it is 19,000 feet. So I looked on the internet, and it said January, February is the best time to climb because there's no rain. So off I went, and it turned out it rained every day I was there. Nevertheless, I take this picture from the internet. This is the way it looked when we finally made the summit. It turned out to be a beautiful day that day, clear skies. This is a sign that marks the tallest point. But this was my summit photo. My camera had got wet. My film was ruined. I described this as 50 shades of gray. So nevertheless, on these climbs, you meet people, they say, and suggest other climbs to make. So the next one I decided to go for was Mount Elbrus. Now, what was the problem? Well, Elbrus is 18,000 feet, and it's an alpine climb. Again, glacier, crampons. And this is 4,100 feet higher than Mount Rainier, the very mountain I failed miserably on. So I thought about it, but then asked, well, why not? Why not try for it? So I flew to Moscow, a very beautiful city. You fly from a regional jet down to the Caucasus, and this is the route that one takes. You stay a couple of days in these man-made barrels as a base camp. When we started this climb, we got above the cloud layer. It looked like it was going to be a beautiful day. But shortly thereafter, a snowstorm came in where fresh snow was now being deposited in large amounts. It makes the climbing incredibly difficult. I made the summit. Now, normally this is how it would look. This is a rock that identifies the highest point. But here's my summit photo. So again, you might ask that I'm just in a white room, but please take my word, this is the summit of Elbrus. So at this point in time, I'm feeling pretty good. I've done 2 of the 7 summits. I'm not doing so good on summit photos, but I can live with that. And so I asked myself, well, should I go back to Mount Rainier? And so I thought about it, and definitely, why not? Give this now a try. And so I went back to Rainier, and I made the summit. And this is truly one of my most gratifying summits because I had failed so miserably that first time around. Well, the next mountain I tried was Aconcagua. Aconcagua is the tallest mountain in South America. It's located near Mendoza in Argentina. Now, this is a climb where you have a base camp of about 14,000 feet. There's 4 or 5 high camps. The summit is roughly just shy of 23,000. Now, the first time I went down there, I just made it to the 19,000-foot camp. I had to turn around. My whole group turned around because there was incredibly high winds. This is the tallest point I had reached on that trip. Our tents got destroyed because of the winds, and we had to turn around. So I waited a year, and I went down a second time. But this time, I only made it to what's called the Traverse. Once again, we were doing well, but a huge snowstorm came in. Again, it was thought, due to time constraints and the like, it was not thought to be safe to go any further, so we turned around. So the question was, now, do I want to go down a third time? So again, I thought about it, and indeed, there was no way I was going to leave this mountain undone. Why not? I'm definitely going to go. This time, we had great weather. Now, and I made the summit. As I think about this retrospectively, probably a big reason I tried to go down there 3 separate times is the wine down in Argentina, the Malbec, great. It's really outstanding. Well, then the next of the 7 summits was Denali. Denali is the tallest peak on the North American continent. And people would, I was all this climbing, I'd meet people, I'd always say I'd never wanted to do Denali because it was just simply too hard. You have to carry packs and drag a sled that totals about 70 pounds because the weather is very unpredictable. When you get to high camps, you don't know how long you're going to be stuck there waiting for weather windows to open up. Moreover, the historical summit rate was about 50%. And, I was actually scared of failing. And then, the theme of our symposia, I asked the question, why? But also, once again, why not? So it was off to Alaska to give this a try. Again, you fly in the Calhitna Glacier. It's at 7,200 feet. And from there, it's 15 miles up to the 14,000-foot camp. That's the main base camp. And we were there for about 6 days waiting for weather windows to open up. Once it did, we then made our summit attempt. Again, going up to that 14,000-foot camp, just like I was told, we had to carry huge loads. You had a pack, you had a sled. You have roughly 60, 70 pounds of both food, fuel, because again, you have to be prepared for long stays at these various camps. Once that weather window opened up, we head up this head wall. You can see the climbers moving up. You go then through the Denali Pass, very steep drop-offs. Then the summit ridge, again, a beautiful day, and I was able to make the summit. And again, a very gratifying climb because initially I was so fearful of even trying this. The next of the 7 summits was the Vinson Massif. This is Mount Vinson. It's the tallest peak in Antarctica. Again, I had a little bit of concern here because, number one, it's very isolated. It's obviously very cold. But again, thinking about it for a while, why not go? And so off I did. You fly commercial airlines down to the southernmost part of Chile, Punta Arenas, and there's actually a private company that has this old Russian jet that people get into. It's a 5-hour flight to to Patriot Hills, they call it. And this is our jet. This gives you a whole new meaning to carry-on luggage, I will tell you. Anyway, after landing on a solid blue ice runway, we immediately get onto these prop planes that then deliver us to the Eldridge mountain range. Now, these prop planes then immediately go back to Patriot Hills, and they say, we'll be back in 7 days. So what makes this climb a little bit dangerous is if you get into trouble, there's really very few teams climbing, number one, and there's really nobody to rescue you. So we establish a base camp here, and once again, this is a climb where as you move to higher camps, you don't know how the weather's going to be. You carry a pack, a sled with a lot of fuel, a lot of food. Again, in all of these climbs, you gain an appreciation for working in a team, and this is a typical rope team. You are always roped up on a glacier because of the opening up of crevasses that might have been covered with snow bridges. But we had a beautiful summit day, and this is the top of the tallest peak in Antarctica. The wine in Antarctica, not so good, but it will do in a pinch. You have to take it with you. So that's our celebratory wine. The next of the 7 summits is called the Carstensz Pyramid. This is actually the tallest peak on the Australo-Indonesian continent. and it's actually located in the island of Papua. Now again, I was a little bit fearful for even trying this climb because I was told you have to do rock climbing, there's a lot of rope climbing, and I'd never really done that much of that stuff, and so I was a little bit fearful. Moreover, the weather is very unpredictable, and people would ask me about this mountain, and I'd say, there's no way I'm going to try that. But once I got to this point, again, I started thinking about it, and I asked that very question, why not Joe? And so I did. Again, as I say, it's on the island of Papua in Indonesia. This is a ridge climb. What makes this climb difficult, you start on one end, and it's like climbing a ridge all the way to the top. And to give you a perspective, this is the ridge. And incredibly steep drop-offs. Again, it's total rock and rope climbing. This is a maneuver we had to do called a Tyrolean cross, where you'd hook carabiners into ropes and then pull hand over hand. About 1,000-foot drop in between there. Again, we was able to get it done. As they said, the weather was unpredictable. It started snowing when we were up there. It even rained. But again, I was able to make it to the summit of the Carstensz Pyramid. Now, I will tell you, as a physician, there's a saying, a doctor who treats himself has a fool for a patient. You have to take malaria prophylaxis because you're in Indonesia, and I took it. But when I got back to the United States, despite the recommendation for continuing it on for a couple of weeks, I just stopped it. And I will tell you, I actually came down with malaria, but I successfully was treated, so not a problem. The question then came up, well, would you ever do Everest? And I would tell people, there's no way. Everest is too dangerous. I mean, people die there. The expedition is long. I didn't know if I could get off work that long. On the other hand, the argument was I'd already done 6 of the 7 summits. And so I thought about it for a while, and boy, why not? Why not go for the 7? So Everest, of course, is the tallest peak on the Asian continent. And I decided to climb from the Tibet side. This is the North Ridge. This is the side that Mallory and Irvine first attempted Everest back in 1923. And so off I went, but this is as far as I got. I just made it to about 24,000 feet, and I decided to stop. I could have kept going, but I decided to stop. Now, the question comes up, why did I stop? Well, the biggest reason was about 2 or 3 days before we were going on our summit push, 2 climbers had recently died, and that really scared me. And I started asking myself, you know, I have a good thing here in Dallas. I feel I have a good life. I mean, why take the risk? I'd been there for several weeks. You know, I was kind of getting a little anxious to get back home. And I even tried to rationalize the fact that 6.5 of the 7's not so bad. And so I went back. But I have to tell you, I regretted that decision virtually every day for the following year. There was not a day that went by that I didn't think about that place where I had stopped. It was like a rat was just constantly gnawing at me. And, it bothered me tremendously. Moreover, you know, a lot of people knew I had gone to Everest. And that's the very question they would ask me. Did you make it to the top? And the concern was, I'd have to tell them, no, I didn't. And then they would ask me the very question that I used to motivate me. They'd say, why not? And I mean, that really bothered me. And I didn't even want to, it really bothered me. About that time, I met my beautiful wife. And I asked her, you know, I said, gee, I mean, what do you think I should do? This is really bugging me. And she says, oh, there's no question. You got to go back. But surprisingly, she then said, listen, hey, I want to try this mountaineering. So we went to Mount Rainier and made here the summit. I will tell you, it's a whole other story. She's a much stronger climber than I am. So after thinking about it, do I really want to go back to Everest? Absolutely. And so the following year, I went back, and I'll share with you the story. So here I am at the Tibet side, the North Ridge. This is the 17,000-foot base camp. It's 12 miles to the upper camps from here. We load our gear onto these yaks, and we move up to this advanced base camp, 21,000 feet. From this camp, we take this circuitous route up to the North Col, up at 23,000 feet. Now, everybody that's on this side of the mountain has the same weather reports. And when the weather is said to be clear, everybody's moving at the exact same time. So everybody's moving up to that North Col. You can see all the tents that are there on that very narrow ridge. From this point, we're going to go up that slope, and there's 2 high camps, one at 25 and one at 27,000 feet. You go up to that ridge, and then you make a hard right, and you go for the summit. This is a view from the 25,000-foot camp. We spend one night there. At that point, we move to 27,000 feet. We get there about 5 in the afternoon, and we stay there till midnight, about 5-6 hours. At midnight, we leave to go for the summit. The reason being is you try to get to the summit within 12 hours because after noon the next day, the winds really get high and it becomes unclimbable. So you got 2 reasons to make that summit in 12 hours. Number 1, you're going to be out of oxygen at that point. And number 2, again, the weather's going to be very poor. What do you do during those 5 hours? This is my Sherpa and I were in this tent. Again, it's nice and warm and you're feeling pretty comfortable and just thinking about the challenge ahead. Okay, we now leave for the summit. This is the summit ridge. This is one of the most difficult parts of this route. There's 3 technical steps. The so-called second step shown here is about working through this rock formation. The 3rd step, another rock formation. Then up this very steep snow pyramid, and then a traverse ultimately going for the summit. The first step is shown here, the first technical part. It's, again, about a 30-foot area where you pull yourself up on ropes through these rocks. The second step is shown more closely here. The thing that's noteworthy is the Chinese have actually put a ladder there. The ladder's about 5 feet short of the top of the ridge, so when you get to the top of that ladder, you have to grab some ropes that are there and just pull yourself up to the top. This is actually a picture of me coming down where you do the exact opposite. You have to hook onto these ropes, let your feet dangle onto the top of the ladder, and notice that any misstep, it's about 4,000-foot drop from there. So you have to be very cautious. Now, when you get to the top of the second step, this is when you become very focused because you see some casualties of the past. This is a climber that had died the previous year. On the summit night, this 30-year-old man from Ireland who was expecting their 3rd child, he died of cerebral edema. This was the 3rd step, again, about a 50-foot rock formation that you try to climb through. After going up that steep snow pyramid, this traverse, where it's literally 1 foot in front of the other with about a 4,000-foot drop off to the side. But I was able to make the summit. You know, people said, how did you feel at the summit? Again, you know, clearly I was very happy, but at the same time, I was a little bit concerned. I was scared because I'd seen those bodies coming up, and I realized that now coming down and looking this route, I needed to get off that mountain. There was a big temptation to get to that 27,000-foot tent and just crawl back in and try to get warm again. But I will tell you, the recommendation is to go all the way down to 23,000 because those that stay at that high camp, they run out of oxygen, and 2 of the team members I was with stayed overnight in that 27,000-foot camp, and they got very severe frostbite and actually had to have some amputations. So I was able to get down and celebrate completion of the 7 summits. I will tell you, just like the first time I went to Everest, there's not a day that I don't think of that North Ridge. But notice that the rat is no longer there. I truly feel thankful that I was able to complete it. So each of these mountains, I will tell you, they posed a tremendous obstacle. There was something about them that made me think, there's no way I'm going to try that. But for me, just simply asking this question, why not? That was enough to keep me going and at least give it a shot. And there may be things that any of you may be interested in doing, and it might work for you to ask why not, or maybe even more importantly, ask why not now? So thank you very much for your attention.